Hello and welcome back to Cooking the Books with me, Gilly Smith, the podcast which takes us through 4 food moments from the books of our favourite food writers. It's about life through the prism of food, and this week I'm with Meera Sodha, author of Made in India, the Times Book of the Year in 2014, Fresh India, which won the 2017 Observer Food Monthly's Best New Cookbook Award, East, which drew from her Guardian's new vegan column, and now Dinner, with a rather different story.
Within the community, there was always stories about whose son or daughter had become this or that, who'd gone to Cambridge and Oxford and all of that sort of stuff. So you absorb all of that when you're a child and you think, well, there's no chance for me to become anything other than something that has social standing, something that they approve of, something that would make them proud.
This is about the food that helped her recovery from burnout, scribbled in her orange notebooks, which, after years of not being able to cook at all, she would cook only for pleasure. I talked to her just after a piece she'd written about her breakdown had been published in The Guardian, which had prompted an outpouring of love, support and sharing. I asked her if she felt that she had inadvertently touched a national nerve.
I think I really did. I didn't expect quite so many people to engage with that piece, but the comment section under it is just one of the nicest places that I've ever been to on the internet. I feel like a lot of people related to it because they've been through a crisis in their life. And we know that so many people are experiencing burnout. And I don't think, even though we know of a lot of people, it's been covered enough in the media. And so I think I was so nervous about I've never been that vulnerable or that open in the public eye before, but I'm so pleased I did it. I'm so pleased I did it.
From the point of view of realising that so many people felt what you'd felt, or personally, did it make you feel better to talk about something that was a burden in some way for you? I
think it's because it can often feel so lonely being in that place. It took me a really long time to want to share, even with close friends, what I was experiencing, because I didn't know what it was. I'd been so unflappable up until the point where I wasn't, and I started malfunctioning, that I had no idea what was happening to me. I didn't understand the symptoms that I was experiencing. It was all so confusing, and I didn't set out to help people with that piece at all. But when I did, I realised that through the comments section and through people getting in touch, that actually talking about these things is really beneficial. It's always really, really beneficial because it just allows people to validate what they're experiencing, what they're going through, what they've gone through. And I'm definitely not one of those people that you'd follow on Instagram for an aspirational lifestyle. But I do think it's quite helpful that I'm in a national newspaper and things might all look jolly from the outside. And actually they're not. And I think it's quite nice to use my platform and share that life isn't all rosy. It's not what you might think it is.
Yeah, and those symptoms are things that a lot of people will have experienced. Panic attacks, short-term memory loss. In themselves, they happen. Everybody has something approaching those kind of symptoms when you're overwhelmed. There are different levels of burnout, obviously, but most people have experienced something, certainly short-term memory loss all the time as you get older. You kind of get used to that. But it's not that really, is it? It's somebody who is high achieving, somebody who is unflappable. When those and you use the word malfunction, there's something almost sort of robotic about that. You're not working in the way that you would expect to, and it's shocking. It's shocking for you. And when you took to bed, you literally couldn't get down the stairs, could you? You stopped doing everything. We'll talk about the language of love that you could not speak anymore. It must have been the most debilitating of all. But tell us about that malfunction. Explain that a little bit more.
I think it probably happened in different ways. At first, I just felt exhausted, and I didn't know why. I mean, I had a 6-month-old baby, and I thought, of course I'm exhausted. And then I just didn't want to do anything. And I felt like the spectrum of my emotions and my joy had been reduced down to a very narrow band. So I found it very difficult to motivate myself to do anything. I didn't want to go and meet up with a friend. I didn't want to cook. And that was the most shocking thing for me, because food had really been just such a big part of my DNA and my childhood and the way that I navigated my days and life. And it was obviously work as well for me. And then I think because I didn't listen to those initial signals, I didn't really understand what was going on. They just became louder. And that's when I started to experience things like panic attacks or disassociating, sort of just feeling like my brain was really just somewhere else. And I felt truly, let's call it depressed, I felt like crying a lot of the time and quite confused because I just didn't really understand. I'd been so used to having a handle on everything that I found it very difficult. I felt like I'd turned into someone I didn't recognise anymore. And that I found quite scary because I didn't know whether I would get back to that other person or whether this was a permanent state. I'd never experienced this before. So it all felt very discombobulating to me.
Yeah. I mean, let's talk about that person that you were before we knew you as Meera Sodha in The Guardian. And then we'll move on to how you've written a lot about what happened and your road to recovery in the book. I hear this story a lot, and it's always women, and it's always young women, who either put a lot of pressure on themselves or who have pressure put on them by their culture. Gujarati culture is very entrepreneurial. There is a lot of pressure within the culture itself to achieve. We know the kind of the trope of the parents wanting to be a doctor or a lawyer. And we know a lot of people who turn from, doctors and lawyers, but particularly lawyers, to become cooks, and that's a really interesting journey. Not necessarily from Gujarati culture at all. I mean, Olivia Potts was the very first guest on this show, and she talked about being literally catatonic through grief. She was a practicing lawyer and she became a cook. So there's something there that's really, really interesting about the pressure that you, by osmosis, kind of bring into your own life, and then really keep that pressure up. Looking back on that journey, from somebody who was having a lot of fun creating things. I love this dating agency, one of the very first online dating agencies called Fancy and Indian. I love that. You worked for Innocent Drinks, which famously was one of the most, that it was really clever with words. It thought so differently about marketing. You were having a lot of fun putting a lot of pressure on yourself. When you look back at that time, can you see the trajectory that would lead to now?
I can. I can absolutely see it. I just remember being, one of the only people in my year studying for my A-levels who wasn't going out clubbing because I felt the pressure to just use every single minute to be revising. And that was completely internalized from these messages that I'd absorbed, and I don't, I think it's a tricky conversation to have in this area around pressure that was put on me by my parents, because actually there's two sides of the coin. I see what they gave me as such an enormous gift. They told me that I could do anything with my life. And they were self-made. And I saw that and I thought, wow, I was so inspired. I felt like I could do anything. I felt invincible. And that was beautiful. But I hadn't realised the other side of the coin. And so I was so happy just running at 1,000,000 miles an hour, doing everything. And I did have so much fun doing it. I set up an arts organisation to make cities speak, because I felt like they were lonely places. So I put ping pong tables and pianos on the streets of London and other cities. I loved it, but I worked through every single summer. And can I play ping pong myself? No, I can't. And I don't play the piano. And so I think the focus was always off. And it was always about the thing that I was trying to achieve. And I remember just thinking, wow, look at how much I've done. This is amazing. And actually, I wasn't in the actual experience myself. I wasn't playing ping pong. I wasn't having fun with my friends during the summer holidays. I wasn't going out clubbing when everybody else was. So I feel like I missed out on a lot. And so, yes, looking backwards, I think this was always going to be the case for me. And I hadn't quite realised it.
It sounds like you put a lot of responsibility on yourself. And I wonder, looking back at your parents' story, they were political refugees from Uganda. They did arrive with £50 in their pockets. They made life good. Whether there's a sense of, not guilt, but responsibility to do really well because they worked so hard to give you such great foundations.
Yeah, absolutely. I felt like, they made it very clear. They set the bar high. It was because they'd experienced a lot of trauma and poverty in their lifetime. But I wanted to give them that. I wanted to be successful for them. I wanted them to be proud of me. I felt like this was something that was like very much within the community. There was always stories about whose son or daughter had become this or that, who'd gone to Cambridge and Oxford and all of that sort of stuff. So, all of those, you absorb all of that when you're a child and you think, well, there's no chance for me to become, I don't know, anything other than something that has, social standing, something that they approve of, something that would make them proud. So I felt like that path was very much laid out for me, and I did feel a huge responsibility.
Yeah, absolutely. And because the jobs that you chose to do, and a lot of which you created yourself, reflect that entrepreneurial culture of the Gujaratis, but also they are of service, aren't they? Each one of those, they're great fun, but actually it's all about making life better for other people, including the new vegan column for The Guardian. It's about making life easier for people. It's not about you. It's about giving other people access to making life easier for themselves and more delicious and more joyful.
I hadn't really noticed that until you just said it, but I think I am a people pleaser, and I think it's a trait that has to be I have to manage within myself. And I think what's interesting about the new book that I've written is that I've had to take myself away from 7 to 10 years of writing recipes for other people and really think and really come back to myself and understand what I really wanted to eat and what I really wanted to cook and the recipes that I really wanted to write. So this is, in a way, my most selfish cookbook that I've ever written.
Well, it's interesting that you use that word selfish, because it's the moment where you say, okay, what can I do to bring myself back to myself? And we'll go into your first food moment, the Malaysian dal curry, which was the pivotal moment, really, where you had to stop and you had to ask yourself what you wanted. But actually, it came from a request from your husband to do something for him. Yes,
that's right. So that really was a moment that changed everything for me. So I was really lethargic. I didn't want to cook. I was relying really heavily on Hugh to do all of the family cooking and to look after our children. He was holding down his job. He was looking after me. And one day he was really struggling and he said, please, could you cook me a meal? But it wasn't really him asking for that. It was him asking, for me to care for him because he was struggling. And I really walked into the kitchen and I woke up, I went into the store cupboard and I grabbed some lentils and coconut milk, and I keep all my aromatics in the freezer drawer, like the lemongrass and the curry leaves. And I made this approximation of this beautiful Malaysian dal curry that we ate gallons of when we were in Singapore together. And he hadn't asked for that particular meal. And so it was something that I really wanted to cook. I knew that he loved it. I loved it too. And so it was something that we both shared together. It was like and I really felt it. And it sounds so strange to say, but I think it just did feel like quite a big moment. We ate in silence almost. And it did feel like I'd been given back the keys to the kitchen. Because I really enjoyed cooking that meal. And I really felt like, I think this is because I've cooked it out of pleasure and out of love. And I feel like through that I'd found some purpose again.
Well, it's interesting because you do clearly have a love language that is cooking and feeding. And yet that moment when you came back to it, when you suddenly became fluent again, actually both of you were silent. It's so interesting that food can mean so much to you. Do you know now, as you look back at that whole process, what it is? Because your mother didn't even teach you to cook, did she? She wanted you to be out, getting educated, striving for the top. Do you know why you chose it as your love language so early on when it really wasn't being given to you?
Well, it wasn't someone. It was definitely. I know exactly where it comes from, because it's it's all about my mother. And yes, she didn't want me to learn how to cook when I was younger. And I didn't know how to cook when I went off to university. But I certainly learned how to cook by her side when I left university, and I wanted to record the family recipes. And so I went back home and started recording them. Now, she's a very private person. And I think in some ways this is a character trait of all Ugandan Asians. They went through a lot of trauma when they were younger. There's things that they just aren't able to talk about that I still don't know about. And there was a life that she lived before me that I can't access because it's in a country that I cannot visit with her because she doesn't want to go back to Uganda. And so she, I think she found a comfort in cooking herself. You know, she found a way to manage her own trauma through it. And then she could communicate her love to me through food. And that was really how we bonded. And also how I understood or could colour in the jigsaw pieces of my past, something that had just allowed me to grow up in a very white agricultural village in Lincolnshire and understand where I'd come from. And so that's why food is so important to me. And through that, I've really understood that behind each recipe is a story, and that story relates to how things grew, what the political situation was, just family dynamics. I mean, food is everything. It's history. It's how things grew. It's nostalgia. It's tradition. It's everything, really. And that's the same for me now as well. I communicate love through food. And it's, it's just, that's why it's always been such a big part of my life.
Yeah, and so to stop speaking it for, how long was it that you were, in bed or feeling so depressed, unable to cook a single thing?
I mean, it started off in very late 2020, early 2021. And I've come a very long way. And I couldn't really tell you. I think it was like a year, perhaps up to a year.
Yeah. You started to write. What really started you back in the kitchen, and what this book is all about is the Orange Notebooks. Explain that to us.
Well, so my Orange Notebook is a notebook I started when my daughter Aria was born, and Hugh and I just intended to put recipes that we really love to cook in there so that she has a copy of that. And they're often recipes that I haven't published in the column or in any cookbooks, or food that she liked. So it's like a very personal record. And so it just became, it was a very normal thing for me to do. And I just decided that I was going to cook for joy and not for work, to record these very personal recipes in the Orange Notebook. And I wasn't cooking every day. I was cooking, maybe it was once a week at the start, or a couple of times a week. And every time I wrote in there, I'd write a little bit about what happened that day. And then if the recipe was good, I would write it down. And initially I was cooking lots of really simple things, things like omelettes, egg over rice, with like crispy chili oil, with tomato spaghetti, with kimchi. All of these recipes are in the book. And then I wanted curries, things like a sweet corn and spinach saag, or a chickpea and potato curry. And then I felt like I sort of just, over time, I could see that this book was just starting to fill up with these recipes, and I was starting to feel, a rhythm and an excitement. And I could see I was just focused on this one meal, which was dinner. I couldn't, breakfast was sort of, something eaten on toast. Lunch was often warmed up leftovers, but dinner is where I wanted to focus my energy. And I found that just planning it had the power to ground me, and cooking it step by step felt like this small achievement in my day. And sharing it with friends and family allowed me to connect with them in the evening. And I really felt like I'd sort of found something very beautiful in this. And it was quite an eclectic mix of recipes, but yeah, I really found myself again, which was wonderful.
But they then became the book. So they started off as Joy Not Work, but you've then put them into work. Does that mean that you've now put the joy into your work, that you've brought those two selves together?
I think I have. I think I really listen to what I want to eat and what I want to cook. And I think I found joy. I went traveling. I went to Taiwan and Vietnam and Thailand, and I ate. I became excited again. You know, I wouldn't be putting a book out there unless if I was still unwell, if I didn't have this joy, if I hadn't felt like I'd really stumbled across something that had really helped me, I wouldn't have written this book. I mean, it's been 5 years since I published a book, and that's largely because I didn't have a story to tell, whereas I do now. And this food it's very subtly different from the food that I've cooked before. You know, I feel like I'm almost in some ways a lazy cook, in that I'm always looking for like a way to get to, the best flavour in the shortest number of steps or the shortest number of ingredients. And that's what I really love doing. So I have a lot of like one pot, one pan, bung it in the oven dishes in this book, like the Malaysian dal curry that we've spoken about. I've got a butter paneer curry in there that's all made in the oven, or aubergines roasted in satay sauce, or this, Iraqi bean stew that's kind of made in a pot. So they're all like very easy. And what I love about that is that it just allows me to focus on the things that I really love, and that is people. It's really the connection. Food is almost in the background. It's still very important, but it's in the background because I've realized that actually what I really want is connection. And that doesn't mean kippering myself in the kitchen. And it means just getting people through the door and just allowing myself to just cook something simple and put crisps on the table to start with, and buy in pudding because they're not going to judge me. So I've really simplified my life and my food.
Yeah, and it's and the book is full of the moments that have brought you up to this point in your life. Your second food moment is Ben Benton Strikes Again. Ben was a really important part of your life. We met him in your other books. We know him through your writing. You met him in 2012 at the Dot Kitchen, which was one of those moments that you changed your life. He changed your life in many ways, didn't he? You'd just been made redundant by innocent drinks, and you were working in the kitchen for the first time. Tell us why you chose that. Yeah,
Ben's such a big part of my life. He and I share quite similar sensibilities around food, and I hesitate to call us both lazy cooks, but I think he also, just likes to cook quite simple food, and it's always delicious. He's just one of the best natural cooks that I know. And so I asked him one day, what are you cooking for people when they come over now? And he told me about this dish, which wasn't called Ben Benton Strikes Again. That's my name. And the reason why I chose it is because it's got 8 ingredients, and all of those ingredients work incredibly hard. So you fry aubergines and celery and Szechuan pepper and fennel seeds, and then you braise them in a mixture of lao gamma. And the lao gamma is the hardest working ingredient in this recipe. And this is what I really wanted to talk to you about, because a lot of my food relies on deploying these incredible pre-made Asian ingredients into a dish to create instant personality and instant flavour. So la gamma is the chili oil, and it's sort of crispy chili in oil. It's actually not very hot. I know you'll know it. It's very delicious. I feel like if you've got some vegetables, you've got some rice, and you've got the chili oil, you have a meal. But if I just were to highlight some of the other ingredients that I use, like kimchi will add like tang and funk. Gochujang will add sweet heat. Miso will add a lovely sort of savoury umami flavour. And then there are also ingredients like Gita's mango chutney. I fry paneer in the mango chutney, and it forms a glaze. And so you can have, that meal you can have on the table in about 15 minutes. It's a really brilliant ingredient. And also things like peanut butter to make satay sauce, or tahini to form a base of something that's similar to dan dan noodles. I mean, wow. It's a lot of these ingredients are kind of made with practiced hands, and they're good. You can buy good quality ones as well. Yeah. And they just act like sleeping giants, just living in your cupboard or your fridge, just waiting to sort of come out and add, like, give you dinner.
Yeah, inspired by something incredibly important in your journey. Your children are obviously your rock. They are so much part of this story. And your third food moment is the tofu fried rice. which is all about, again, it's this coming together. You used to cook twice, once for them, once for you. Now this is all about cooking together, celebrating food together.
Yeah, so this is the tofu fried rice is it was quite an unusual recipe to pick out because it's barely a recipe, it's more of a template. But the reason why I wanted to highlight it is exactly that. I always over make rice. We've always got rice in the fridge. And I was cooking, I'd be cooking for work and probably something that we couldn't all eat, like a lime pickle that I was perfecting that day. And we'd maybe make something quick like pasta or noodles for the girls. And now we cook one meal and we eat that. And one of the first dishes that I found that we all loved was tofu fried rice. And it's a wonderful vehicle to squirrel away any vegetables that happen to be lingering around in the vegetable drawer. And then you can add, I add sort of 5-spice sesame oil and soy to mine. And I'll fry an onion if I've got one. If not, doesn't matter. You can add vegetables from the freezer. And I guess what I love about it isn't really the adaptability. It's that, that's obviously a bonus, is that I can cook it with my eyes closed. We all love it. It's a complete meal in that it's got carbohydrates, proteins, fats, etc. in it. And it just allows me to tune into the children. Before, when they'd be telling me about a plot twist in Unicorn Academy or Paw Patrol, I'd be zoning out and I'd be somewhere else. And now, we have this, we eat it regularly. It's part of our regular repertoire, and it just allows me to connect to, who farted in maths that day, or, which tree did Yogi climb, or why is she eating so many jacket potatoes this week, or whatever it is that my beautiful children witter on about when they come back from school.
Wonderful. Your last food moment is 18-carat laksa. And you've picked this recipe because it shows what vegetables are capable of. While you've been away, the world has kind of changed, I think. I've been doing this show for 4 years, and before that, the Delicious podcast for 4 years. Over that time, vegetables have taken centre stage, haven't they?
They have.
I mean, how do you see that? You're the queen of the vegan, where's your place in the world now?
I just still like to think that I'm just part of this growing, brilliant conversation around vegetables. I mean, we shouldn't forget that at some point in the not too distant past, we were kind of eating boiled vegetables on the side and putting them onto the side of plates. And how fantastic that we can, and we've got the knowledge to be able to move them into the centre of the table, like you've just said. And so I think some of the most exciting brains and minds and greatest chefs and brilliant companies have been involved in innovating in this area. And I'm very happy that I still can be part of the conversation, that I still feel like I have a lot to learn. And I think with the 18-carat laksa, I often, as just like every other, family cook, will have a bag of something. Is it a whole head of celery? Is it a whole head of broccoli? Is it a whole bag of carrots to use up? And so I've often written these recipes around something, and it's taken me 10 years to write a recipe that uses up a whole kilogram of carrots, and I'm so proud of it. And
because it's a genuine contribution, because you do say in your food moment to me that you have been writing for The Guardian for 7 years, as we know. 7 years ago, you were talking to them directly about how not to cook meat. That's what I mean about that conversation moving on. But what you're doing with those carrots is you are still introducing really different ideas. First of all, tell us how you do that, and then, tell me if that's not a pressure all of its own.
Yeah, well, the way that I did it was, I do think the more you get to know your ingredients, the more you can just join the dots. And one of my favourite things to eat is a curry laksa. And when I was eating it, it has this inherent sweetness to it that comes from the fish cake or the shrimp. And so when I was thinking about making a laksa recipe, and with the carrots. And I thought, well, if I roast them, that will concentrate all those flavours, bring out that sort of savoury, sweet element to them. And I just joined the dots and thought, I think this will work. And it did. And I'm so proud of it because I just love it. It's just one of my favourite recipes. So I'm really happy to be contributing things like that. I mean, as to your question about the pressure, yeah, sure. It is. I mean, that's part of the reason why I had to step away from it for recipe writing for a long time, because deadlines and creativity often don't mix. So, you know, some weeks, like writing a recipe that's vegan with a limited amount of ingredients and trying to come up with something that I consider to be original on a weekly basis is really hard. And some weeks I've got nothing, and that can take a toll on me. You know, it's a real cause of like stress. But also it's been a real, you know, previously I've thrived under deadlines, and I've actually been more creative. You know, it's like kind of writing a haiku. It can be really liberating and fuel my creativity. And so I don't know if I've got a handle on it, this idea of creativity, but I do know that what is important for me is to step away from work every now and then, to keep on filling up my cup, to not, you know, and that doesn't necessarily mean going to eat in restaurants and, you know, finding more inspirations. It means like, you know, going swimming or doing yoga or going for a walk in a forest somewhere, and just not caring about food for a little bit so that I can come back to it and be excited about it again. And possibly that's the same for a lot of people in any creative situation. I think that will probably be people. I've heard that, you know, you kind of need to step away from it in order to want to come back to it, in order to have enough stamina for the thing that you do.
Looking back to those comments, you're speaking to people about something that is different, that isn't what you set out to talk to them about. Have you discovered that there's a new way of writing that speaks directly to people who need more nourishing than perhaps you knew?
So yes and no, I think, is the answer to that. I think the journey that I've been through is a very personal one. I think if people hit a crisis in their life, it probably will be very personal to them. And the way that I've sort of dragged myself out of this, which is an ongoing process, I should add, is very personal to me, you know, and the things that I found that worked, that nourished my soul, that kind of all the self-care, etc. So I don't think I'm going to suddenly, you know, turn out to be some mental health guru that's going to help people along on their journey. Will it affect my work? Yes, I think it will, because I don't think I'm going to change my mind and go back to a world, well, certainly not immediately, where I start writing elaborate recipes for snacks and starters. I don't feel the need to do that anymore. I feel very much like I love writing recipes for dinner and writing simple recipes, and it allows me more space and time in my life and more real estate in my brain. And so this is where I am right now, and I can't see that changing anytime soon.
Thanks for listening. Head over to Substack for extra bites from Meera, including original recipes from her orange notebooks, side by side with the finished product, in a rather beautiful meditation on process. And I'll see you next week.